great to have you today. Really appreciate time to talk with you, Peter. If you just want to start off by introducing yourself, just so we can start from there, that would be great.
Yeah, so my name is Peter Ramsey, and I'm the founder of Built for Mars, which is somewhere between a personal blog and a consultancy advisory thing.
I was going to say that sums it up quite clearly, but yeah, no, that's great. I was going to say, Emily, if you wanted to start off first, and then I can carry on after.
So just kind of want to talk a bit about your fintech kind of background and a little bit about how going from fintech and then you now taking this project and this company and building it up and how that helped you.
Yeah, sure. So I dropped out of uni in my last year, 6 months from finishing a business degree to start a company. That was a fintech company that basically used, well, it didn't start out like that, right? But it ended up using open banking to assess affordability. Super niche, but I think we were really good, and we sold the company in 2018. And then after that, I was didn't know what to do with myself, really. I spent 6 years doing one thing, and then it was like suddenly needed something else to do. So I just helped like friends with products, and after a while, I kind of looked back and I thought, actually, the bit I enjoyed the most out of everything, being a founder, CEO, whatever, was just making products and just making things better and working out how humans work, because they're quite weird, right?
Yeah.
And so trying to do that, and that kind of friends told friends, and then 2 years later, I'm working on some cool projects with some big companies, just from that, really. And so the website was just I only started that about 6 months ago. That was really just a place, because I was making I was doing the research anyway, right? And I was making these presentations, and I was like, God, if I just publish these, people would actually like find them interesting, or may find them interesting, right? And that's what's happened. But so the website was never the thing, really. I just kind of accidentally became a UX consultant, and now I love it.
To be honest, I mean, even with that, just as a story to start off with, I think a lot of the time it can be seen that sometimes with you saying, obviously, that you being at uni and then suddenly having, I don't know if you'd call it sort of an epiphany, but you kind of had a moment where you realize, actually, I know what I want to do. And it seems to be that it's already created some sort of success for you because you have been able to sort of develop it. And like you said, friend from a friend, to really kind of branch out into understanding like the human side of, what with your what you're creating.
Yeah, it wasn't so much, epiphany probably is the wrong word, right? So we started out, it's a funny story. So we started out being like TripAdvisor for student housing. So the idea was like, so many bad landlords, right? And people will go on and review their landlords. Anyway, we somehow pivoted into this fintech product, but that's how it started out. And so it wasn't like an epiphany of a moment. It was like, I was so annoyed at our landlord because they charged us like so much money that in the end I was like, I've had enough, right? And it was like, the Karen meme online where it's like, I was like the ultimate Karen, right? I was like, I'm going to start something and then I'm going to be able to slag you off on it. And that was how it started. But it wasn't like a single moment. It was like 3 years probably.
Yeah, it's such a new thing, I suppose, because you said you founded it, was it September last year?
So I sold the company September 2018, and then straight away was like helping friends like that week, really, because I still worked there for a year. Like I was kept on. I had like an earn out effectively, but then it was like part time, so I did some other stuff. It's very vague. There's no like certain. I haven't like there's no certain date, I guess.
It just happened.
It just happened.
Yeah. I mean, that's fine. Well, I think again with that, I think it's just a lot of, especially for a lot of listeners. I think what we had discussed before is just to really sort of get a better understanding, obviously, of what you do and kind of map it out there. Just kind of, I think we'll just branch out if we can go on to the next question. I was going to say, if Emily, if you want to go with the next
Yeah.
one.
I just want to know about why user experience is so important.
Yeah. So user experience is like everything you see and touch, right? So you know, if you get a job as a designer, you will end up doing UX, right? And then people will say you're the UX designer, you design the experience, but you know, the experience is everything. So it's from the sign you have on your office window, right? From
Totally.
you know, like everything, you know, the handrails on stairs are experience. That's UX. So it's important to everything we do. It touches every aspect of the entire company, and the tech companies you see today that do really well and make brilliant products. So you know, big names like Airbnb, right? Those guys, they have a culture where it's not a UX designer's role to do UX. It's like everybody, the salespeople are trained in experience, and you know they will use that word like more liberally. So I think it's really important, which is everything. I'm biased, right?
I guess with that sort of image in mind, you know, with you saying, you know, for rails on a set of stairs, you know, it is sort of that kind of, would you call it like a sort of, it's an interaction you're having through either the design elements of something?
Everything, you know. So the study I've done really recently, which I think we'll talk about in a bit, was the bank stuff, right? You know, to kind of jump ahead a little bit, one of the things in there in the first chapter was the envelopes, right? I talk about the envelopes that banks send their cards out in. And what's really funny to me about that is like these challenger banks, Monzo, Revolut, and Starling, they're desperate to be seen to be different, right? They want to shout from the rooftops like, we are not your traditional bank. That's their whole thing. And you know what, like all these traditional banks do is they send the cards out in the same envelopes, and it's the envelope that, like, if you saw it, you'd go, oh, it's a bank envelope, right? Like nobody is excited when it comes through, but these other, you know, these other companies, just by changing the envelope, it changes the mindset of when you pick up that card for the first time, like on the doorstep, you're like, oh, I know what this is, right? Like, because it's like a different color, it's like a bit weird. And so, you know, where would that fit in the design of like a company? Like, whose role is that to choose the envelope? Well, I can almost guarantee in these big traditional banks, someone once decided it was the white envelope, right? Probably in compliance. They were like, we should say private and confidential on it, right? Sounds serious. And that's been it now for like 30 years. And, you know, no one touches that. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but.
No, I think we're just, that's a good point actually to think about, because it is sort of a visual aid that you need sometimes. You know, banking a lot of the time does sort of involve very sort of serious, important information, whether it's to do with, you know.
Oh no, is Charlotte just like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh no. I wonder where she was going with that. Okay, I'm gonna skip on to one of my questions, which I'm hoping it kind of leads on from what you were saying anyway. Do you think a lot of it is sort of like branding? So if there's companies that have really strong branding, you don't even need to see the logo anymore, it's just a color, and you can recognize, you know, a company through that. Do you reckon is it similar to that in a sense? Because it's like experience through what companies have to offer through design.
Yeah. So there's a small element of that, right? So if a company is like synonymous with trust, so you know, a company like Visa, right? If you see Visa's making this payment, you don't really think twice about like it. You just think, well, that kind of trust that. And so, you know, nothing in their logo is implicitly trustworthy, but because that logo is on an experience, it will change your perception of that experience. So you take the Visa checkout and put some like dodgy logo you've never seen before, suddenly everything feels dodgy, right? And it changes like how you would, you know, if I was designing an experience for an established company like Visa and one for a startup doing payments, they would probably end up being completely different.
Yeah. That's interesting. That something like that as well. Like that just interests me because a lot of what I look into is design and companies. Obviously, I look at like social media marketing, and it's like what makes a company stand out. So that's interesting. I guess we'll just carry on without Charlotte for the time being. But so your chapter 3 just went live today. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, about like 2 hours ago.
Yeah. So I saw that was about like.
Sorry, I don't know what happened. Luck is not on my side this morning, unfortunately. Everything just crashed. Had a moment.
Good. It's all good. We
if you just bear with me a second, I just want to. I'm not even sure if. Well, I'm hoping that would have saved as a recording.
It's still recording.
It's still recording. Okay, yeah. So it was just me having a disappearance, but we're all good.
Yeah, we carried on. We're now going to start talking about chapter 3 that just went live today.
Okay, lovely. Yeah, I'll let you carry on.
Okay, I'll restart that a little bit again. So your chapter 3 has just gone live this morning, is that right? Yeah. So I've looked at like, you've released some like graphs. You do your graphs for your chapters, which seem like, I see them all over my LinkedIn, to be honest. The one today is how many clicks it takes to freeze your card. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about why you do these graphs and why you think it's so important that it's to do with clicks, and also I think you do time as well? Just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I wish I'd watermarked those graphs because I see them everywhere as well, like out of context. So the graphs were like, I wish I could say it was all some like smart move that I'd planned, but the graphs were like a late addition. The case studies that you see, they're the first things I did. So that's what I normally do. And then I was like, I need to tie these together with some content. And then I was like, I could put it in a graph. So I don't know, the graphs are important because I think it's useful because you can look at it, right? And it's like, it's visual. Then, clicks to make like clicks to freeze your card. Like I think I say straight away afterwards, it's like this is quite a poor metric to like judge an experience on, right? Like actually what I'm showing in that one is this is how much banks prioritize like frequent access to this thing. That's kind of my point there. And I couldn't think of a better graph than a bar chart, but there's probably like a Venn diagram or something that would work slightly better, but yeah.
Well, I guess from that graph, I mean, touch wood, I don't crash out when I answer, is that a lot of the time, I suppose a lot of the information from that graph, it just helped to break up. A lot of the time, if it is when it comes to going onto your banking website or whatnot, or making a payment, you do have that repetition of either screen after screen or information after information, where it can just then drag out the process longer. And you're not, I suppose, achieving as quick a time what you want to achieve that would be in a simple few clicks.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's it's a constant balance, and it's like there's no perfect route either. Like a lot of this is like, it's very nice that TechCrunch call me like a specialist, right? But like it's just my opinion, right? Like it could easily just like I didn't give them that word, so very nice of them, but like this is just my opinion of what I think a nice experience should be like. But yeah, you could have, far fewer clicks and a much nicer one. You could double the clicks and have an even nicer one. Like the challenge is it does every click matter? That's probably the best, and a good graph would be me rating if every click mattered, but then it's kind of like, it's very opinion based. And here's a graph of my opinion doesn't seem very sensible, like, but yeah, maybe that's what I should do.
Yeah, maybe that's what I do.
Yeah.
I try and not give my opinion too much because, there's a lot of opinions on Twitter, right? Like there's enough opinions out there. I try and just point out stuff and go, this takes longer and this is why you may feel it takes longer. I try and not say, and this is better.
Right.
Because ultimately I'm one demographic, right? I'm like a 27-year-old male, right? But then 50-year-old female might look at that and go, actually, I prefer the other one, right? And she's not wrong. You know, so if HSBC turn around and say 90% of our audience are, you know, migrants, right? That's a different world. Like, you know, that's not what I think the experience should be like. So, yeah.
No, I think that's a good point to mention, because I suppose, like you said, you know, for example, on Twitter, you know, a lot of the time interactions, I think it must have been the other day. Again, if I'm wrong, Emily, I can't remember if I saw it with you or if I just saw it online, but obviously on Twitter with some stuff, you know, it will only have coverage for about 20 minutes. And sometimes the coverage for it, you know, for example, with yours, if you're just pointing it out as a general sort of bunch of information, you know, sometimes not having an opinion on it, just putting it out there to have it for other people to see, kind of, it helps them make up their own mind or their own decision on something. So like you pointed out, if you've got a certain demographic which are looking at HSBC or a different bank, for instance, and they prefer that process, it does then come back interesting to see what sort of figures go behind it, of if it's 90% that work for this way of doing banking. It is that is an interesting point to put out there, actually, because you do get to get more of a feel of, you know, how it works.
There are some things like, you know, like a lot of people online, I'm trying to think of a nice way to word this. Online, people are like, there's a few people that are slagging me off, basically. That's the best phrase I can think of. They follow me around on LinkedIn, like posts I get tagged in, and then will just like slate me and call me a liar, as if I've just made up statistics, right? And these banks haven't checked it. Like,
right.
Like, these banks have all been in touch with me, like, you know, pretty senior people from these banks, even the ones that do really poorly. And like, do you not think that if I lied about it taking like 60 days to create an HSBC account, there'd be a message out there going, by the way, that's not true. Like, took 10, you know, but that's one, for example, where it's like, there's no room for error in terms of like demographic, that it's okay for it to take that long. Like, no one wants it to take longer. So some of the graphs are like, you know, and that's why I think that first chapter did so well, is because it's like, you know, separated from my opinion. It's like very like experience based.
Well, I think going with that, you know, Emily and I have both had a look through, obviously, your previous success on LinkedIn, just with the different awards that you've had, you know, whether you've been a finalist, just going through the last year or so, you know, that's still a great foundation that you're creating for yourself, that you are putting yourself out there. It is developing, and it just seems to be, you know, that you always get given that question of where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? But I'm sure you still have that mindset of there's only so many, like, there's so much more to come, and it can only get better.
I hope so. Yeah, I say that all the time. Like, if you know, so I said, so I should be wife now, but we've had to cancel the wedding. But I say to her all the time, like, because of coronavirus, not because we had an argument. So I say to her all the time, like, you know, if we stay here forever, I'll be so disappointed. And it sounds so ungrateful, but it's like, because, you know, if I spend the next 60 years of my life just trundling along doing stuff, it'd be quite disappointing, right? So yeah, I'm always trying to level it up, but that sounds horribly cliched, and I don't know how to do that, you know. But I think that's what everyone does, right? Like,
of course. I mean, I think like you've just mentioned, obviously, with the unfortunate coronavirus situation at the moment, that it does seem to be the level with that as well. You know, a lot of that you mentioned before is you do sort of do working from home, or you are able to do working remotely. Is there anything which you'd say at this current moment in time has kind of been a bit more of a benefit for you, or something that you're missing? You know, like for us, we've had an element of missing either just the social interaction of being at the office. Is there anything that's kind of hit the nail on the head with you at the moment?
So my life hasn't changed a huge amount. So, like, to give you an idea of my work week, how it normally works, right? Like, I'll spend probably half my time with clients, right? Like, so people building products or whatever, right? Well, it's always products. I don't know why I said that. Like, people building products, and then I do some stuff with them, right? And then the other half of the time, I'll either be doing my own stuff. Like, I'm also trying to build another company at the moment that's like super techy. I won't go into it because it's like it's a rabbit hole basically. But
we don't mind rabbit holes. I mean,
well, yeah, it's like anyway. I shouldn't say, but we're in like it's me and these guys are building this thing in like stealth mode basically. So that's probably like a year and a half away.
Oh, okay.
So I spend half my time doing that company, or Built for Mars, like the website, like the case studies you see. You know, the half that I spend with clients, I would either do at home, like the rest of the stuff I do at home all the time. The half with the clients, I'd either be at home or I'd be like traveling up to London to see them wherever they are. Now I don't do that, obviously, and that's really nice for me because that was always like, you know, traveling to London from Brighton is not fun. Like I don't know if you like that Southern Rail line.
I was going to say that's a trek, yeah.
Yeah, and it's if it turns up, right? So I used to drive to Canary Wharf and then get the train. It was like a real nightmare. Anyway, it was nice. Like you know, it's nice to have the face-to-face time, but I think we're fortunate now. Like something that's fortunate out of it is people accept like Zoom calls as like a normal thing now. Whereas before it would have been like, oh, you can't be bothered to turn up. Whereas now people are like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll just jump on Zoom. So I spend so much less time traveling. You know, so it's all right. I hate to say it's all right for me, but like work-wise, it's like it's not too bad. I can get by, right?
Yeah,
I guess that's it. Yeah, go on, Emily.
Well, I was going to say actually, in the current pandemic, do you think banks have realised how important user experience is and technology, and the fact that people aren't going to their banks to speak to people, speak in person as much? Do you think that's changing digital and user experience at all?
Yeah, so I mean, one way to look at it is like I haven't got a crystal ball, right? I don't know which way this lands in 2 years' time. But like if fewer people visit branches, it means having that really nice branch experience will be less important. So, Monzo, Revolut, Starling, they're all great. You can't go and visit them. Whereas when I go to my bank, I can go in store. I live in quite a small town near Brighton, so they seem to recognize my face. You get like a bit of face-to-face time, that builds to the trust, right? When you can see someone in a nice suit and they're like, I'm the branch manager, you're like, oh, okay, you can handle my money, right? That's all part of the experience. So, if coronavirus stops people, or if this just change in perception stops people visiting branches as much, they should spend less money on that experience and more money on the digital equivalent, which would be quick customer service, right? As part of the study, I sent a message to each of the banks, right, to like see what their response would be about something. I don't know if it will make it in because the responses were so bad that I'm like, this is like probably not very useful. But it was something I did, and like honestly, I think only one replied within like 3 hours. And so for me to be like, hey, I've got this urgent problem, and then at least 2 of the challenger banks, bear in mind, like didn't respond for 3 hours, that's pretty bad. So, within 3 hours, I would have just driven to the branch and started shouting at someone. So yeah, I think it'll be more important to transfer some of the money that would have gone into nice central locations into product.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important incentive actually, because I suppose it's similar to you, from my experience with banking or just either going into a branch compared to using it online, it is just that mentality of adapting to current situations, like I mentioned with coronavirus, and with working remotely. But I think with banking, it does seem like one of those things that if you go into a bank, I can go in and have the comfort of talking to someone, face to face, or you'd still have someone there to, like you said, manage your money. You can at least be like, you can see a face to where the money is going, and that there is a lot of development, with stuff going online, and you've got those still sort of interactions of a 2D surface of having someone explain, investments, or anything to do with, key information that you need. But I think that's one of the things. It does seem to be that with the current pandemic, it is just quite significant for banks to really try and work.
Yeah, and it's totally irrational of humans to. I say humans. It might come across weird. People used to laugh at me at my last job because we worked a lot with automation, and I'd refer to people as humans a lot, and then they'd always laugh because it's like, yeah, anyway. But people are super irrational. There is no reason why my money is safer because I can see a man who works at a bank. Like, he just works there. He could leave, right? And then there's a new face, right? And there's so much subconscious psychology that goes into, like, if you first visit a branch and the person doesn't smile at you, I haven't got stats to back it up, but I bet you trust that bank less, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like, it's super irrational to feel like that. And something that coronavirus has done is just accelerated things that were inevitable anyway. So the movement out of cities, like Silicon Valley's like commercial prices just too high, right? That is something that is going to burst someday. Something needs to happen, and this will probably end up being some catalyst for like companies moving out of the valley and into cheaper areas, pay people who are just as good, but you can pay them a lot less money. That was inevitable, but it needed some sort of ignition, right? And that's what this has done. And I think in banking, there are so many areas where people will win out of this situation because perceptions change. So yeah, people don't go into branches. In 6 months' time, will they turn around and go, I didn't go into a branch 6 months, I don't need to do this in a branch, right? Like, that might die down. You might see that high street banks don't exist on the high street in the same way. International payments, like, a lot of people are sending money internationally right now, and it's still, so that's the next chapter. It still costs £25 to send a payment to Santander. I sent a £1 payment and it cost me £26, right? £24. I mean, so it's like, that's mental. Like, how does that, how is that a thing? And it's just unacceptable when, lots of banks charge nothing. Like, who's paying £25? So, I would expect to see international payments like really see change there. Companies like TransferWise and stuff, like, they've been just like mopping up basically all the banks that aren't innovating. I think a lot of people will be surprised at the rate of change in the next 18 months. Like, it'll probably be great. It'll be greater than the last 5 years, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is just one thing that we've got to, I guess it's sort of pending at the moment. We can imagine what it's going to be like and see, hopefully, when we come out of this tunnel, with regards to the pandemic and obviously getting things back to normality or whatever normal is. But I think, that's going to be an interesting one to see. I was just thinking, if we want to move on to maybe talking about the chapters a bit more. Obviously, we know, I'm not sure if anything was covered when the internet crashed.
A little bit. We spoke about chapter 3 a little bit, but obviously if this is going out June 12th, then you're more than welcome to talk about your next chapter if you like.
So I was going to send them over last night, but it took me way longer than I thought, and I don't have like the final stats for that sort of stuff.
That's fine.
I finished the one that was released this morning about 20 minutes before I published it, and then I sent it out to the newsletter, and then forgot to take the password off the WordPress post, and so I sent it to everyone with a password on. It's been a really bad morning basically, but the first thing to do when I get up with call is to carry on, and then hopefully, it'll be tight again. Like, next week it'll be on the morning of. It's really tight at the moment. But so yeah, I don't really have a lot to talk about, unfortunately.
That's fine. So just from that, why do you think it's so important, what you're doing, and why this information? I mean, will it make a difference? Do you think people are going to recognize, oh my gosh, that is so much quicker for me to do that, or that takes me less clicks? That's a bank that I should be
Well, I hope it's important, right?
Yeah.
It's like, do I think consumers? Do I think it will be noticeable that consumers will change behavior off this article? Like, no, realistically not. Like, if anyone's going out there and changing their bank based on this article, awesome, please get in touch, right? Because like that'd be a great case study for me. But like, I don't think that's realistic. I think what I've done is because there are so many people that do like case studies on like reports, right? They call them reports, and they're normally a consultancy called like FinTech Extra Consultancy or whatever, right? And it's like they spend 6 months doing a report. It's like 80 pages. It's a PDF. No one reads it. Completely dry. Something I've tried to show here is like to the banks, like this is the difference between the challenger banks and yourself in a lot of regards, right? This is the stuff that internally these banks all know they did this, right? And the guys that started these banks, and the teams they work with, they clearly understand product, and this is the stuff they've discussed internally and you haven't ever thought about, or at least you haven't built. So I think what's likely to happen is the banks will change stuff because, well, actually, I know some of the banks will change stuff because some of the banks have already changed stuff. One of the problems I've got now is I told the banks I was doing a freeze chapter section, and like a handful of the banks changed their page in between me telling them and like launching it. And like, because I told them this is what's being released and here's like a statistic. And then that statistic obviously changed because they went and changed the stuff. So I know that they've been changing stuff and they've told me that they're working on things. So it's like, if nothing else, if the banks just change a few stuff and they have this like long-term appreciation for like their own product, like I think that's like a win, right? But I don't think people see my report and then go out and open like Revolut accounts. Like I don't think that's happening.
You never know.
Well, if they do, I want to be on commission, right? Like I should get a code or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, and it's gone out of my head. That's unfortunate. Yeah, it's totally gone. I can't remember what I was going to say. Emily, I'm not sure if you've got any more questions.
Probably just to kind of start to wrap things up. I don't want to ask any cliche questions like where do you see your future, but I guess that was what I was going to ask.
Yeah. I honestly, I don't know. I don't know. Like the metrics the metrics I like use myself in terms of like money and stuff wouldn't be right. It's like, it's not interesting to anyone else, right? Like, I think people have internal, like, I would really like to have this item. And it's like, if that was publicized, they'd be like, God, that's embarrassing that like my life is built around that item, But I just want to be building stuff I enjoy, working on things I want to do. Not a very interesting answer, but
no, that's
well. I think I think one thing which I think should be mentioned was the discussion we did have before this was obviously when you mentioned about cash machines. If you wanted to branch into that, the difference of the interaction you have in the normal space of the day of going for a cash point.
Yeah. So this is like one of my favorite examples, just of like UX, and I think it helps. So I sometimes do like workshops with companies where I'll like do like an ask me anything or like a basically like a Zoom call with like some employees, and they'll be like, I don't understand UX, right? Like they work in development or something, and I kind of have, I think, explained it to you a little bit, but this example like highlights that. So if you were to design a cash machine right now, and it might end up looking something like a cash machine does now, right? It'd have a screen, some buttons. Like, sure, you might make the screen better, and you might make because when you look at a cash machine and it's like the button doesn't line up with the thing,
Mm.
And you're like having to like bend down, like, you know, solve that problem first, right? And then, but you might have solved that problem and you have a cash machine. Now, you take that, you show 100 people, feedback's really good, fine. But when you take that same cash machine and put it in like different contexts, so like a nightclub, right? And you have someone at 3 a.m. who's like super drunk, and they're trying to show off their friends, and they want to take out like £500 and buy like a bottle or something, right?
As you do, yeah.
You know the type, right? And normally really bad at conversation, buy lots of alcohol. And then anyway, the cash machine that they would use, if you were designing a cash machine just for drunk people, it'd be different. Like nobody would argue that it should look like that. You'd have fewer buttons, you'd have more like, are you sure questions? You'd probably have like a limit of like something sensible. You know, in fact, it would look totally different, and you'd see it and you'd go, I've never seen a cash machine like this before. But then when you're drunk, it would make a lot of sense. Anyway, my point is the experience that you design, like just in those two contexts, you've got two different cash machines. There's two different products. But people, when they build a product, will think of like their office, or, you know, they even think of the device they're using. So, you know, when I design stuff, I normally think about my iPhone, right? I don't think about the like BlackBerry that someone still owns, right? Because it just doesn't cross your mind. So the context of environments is like really different, and that's actually where the name Built for Mars came from. I don't think I've ever told anyone this because it's like super lame, right? But the name Built for Mars was like, the context of Mars is like super like harsh and weird environment. It's like, if you build a product for Mars, you're having to preempt all the weird things that might happen there. You know, in that movie, The Martian, where he's like, have you seen The Martian?
Yeah.
Right? So I told you, this is super weird. So when he has to like grow that veg, right? You know, there's stuff he has to do there that if you were like selling him, oh my God, I can't believe I went down this. If you were selling him like a grow your own veg kit, right, for Mars, it would look totally different to the veg kit that you buy here.
Yeah, of course.
So the name Built for Mars was like, the product is built for the context of like an alien environment, like something that, that was it. And now I've realized, saying it aloud, why I've never told that story.
No, to be honest, that makes a lot of sense. I think because that was on my mind, you know, because I think looking at the company name and the website and stuff, it was very much sort of, it's out of this world, but you're creating something that has to work, that, you know, that kind of has to adapt to that environment. So, you know, could I put into the question, is that why sometimes you put it as talking about humans and human side of
that? You know, I've talked about people as being humans for so long now, and I don't know why, and it's weird. It's nothing to do with that. I think it's just where, like, when you work with systems, and like we did a lot of stuff with, like, I don't want to say AI because it's not AI, and someone who actually does AI would look at it and go like, you know, you're lying, basically. But it's like, it felt like AI to me, right? Like it's like super low level, but for me it was like, this is the smartest thing I've ever seen. You know, so when I talked about humans, it was like, we talked about how the software would see stuff and the human would see stuff, and saying people sounded more like users. So human is more like objectively, I imagine, like, you know, an outline of a human, right?
Yeah, of course. No,
yeah, I don't know.
that makes sense. Yeah.
The weird way I view the world, right?
But it makes sense. That's the thing with this whole fintech, you know, discussion, you know, for the podcast. It is just kind of, there's a lot to be explored through the work that you do, and I think sometimes just breaking it down and simplifying it, it just helps to sort of make it easier to comprehend, I suppose, for listeners, you know, that are in the industry, people that want to know more but don't necessarily have the right questions, or, you know, it is just one of those things. And I think from Emily and I think we can both agree, we've learned a lot from this, and I think it's just exciting to see that what else is going to be developed in the next 6 months, the next 12 months for you. So, you know, really appreciate the time for you for doing this, and I think as well, it's just a good time to wrap it up. Like Emily said, we won't put any sort of cheesy last liners or anything, but yeah,
nice. Just a really boring story about, you know, the Martian film.
But it's a classic, and you know what? I give you credit for linking that to your work, so
Yeah.
I can't fault that.
Fine.
No, it's been great, Peter. Really appreciate it, and we'll obviously we'll let you know how things go. But thanks a lot. Really
Brilliant.
appreciate it.
Cheers. All right. Well, get in touch anytime.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll let you know how this goes, and speak soon.
Brilliant. See ya. Bye.